Welcome to the Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We're excited to have you be a part of this important public process. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to address the commission on both non-agenda and agenda items. The agendas and speaker request cards are located in the back of the council chambers. You must fill out a speaker request card in order to address the commission. Please hand in your completed card to a city staff member. You may check the "I do not wish to speak" option on the card. This allows you to still voice your opinion on an item on the record without having to speak. In accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact a staff member if you need any assistance. Public comment on a non-agenda item will take place during the citizen comment portion of the evening. These are items that don't appear on tonight's formal agenda. The commission secretary will call your name when it's time for you to speak. At that time, please approach the podium and tell us your name for the record. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes. The timer is on the screens visible from the podium. Note that you may also choose not to speak if other speakers before you have said what you wanted to say. Shouting, cheering, and loud noises will not be tolerated, and violators may be removed for disrupting the meeting. Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meetings stream live on YouTube and online at goodyearaz.gov. Follow the city's social media pages so you don't miss out on all that's happening in Goodyear. Thank you for coming to this meeting and being an active part of your city. And remember, it's a great time to be in Goodyear.
Good evening, everyone. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of November the 6th, we've gone to November 2024, is called to order. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the secretary note the roll?
Of course. Commissioner Booth is present. Commissioner Hegedus is present. Commissioner Wang is present. Commissioner Nepomuceno is present. Commissioner Smith is present. Vice Chair Sambito is present. Chairman Clymer is present. We have a quorum.
Item number 1 is to approve the draft minutes of the last meeting. Will the secretary please read the recommendation?
Approve the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on October 16th, 2024. Is there a motion and a second for the staff recommendation? I have a motion from Commissioner Booth, a second from Commissioner Wang. Please enter your vote. Did you get it? Okay, thank you. Motion passes.
Now's the time for citizens who would like to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on any non-agenda items. Are there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone in the audience wish to speak on a non-agenda item? Okay, thank you. This is now the opportunity for commission members to disclose any ex parte communication they may have had prior to this meeting on any item scheduled for discussion on this agenda. Ex parte communication is any outside communication commissioners may have had regarding items on tonight's agenda. As a reminder, the Planning, where are we at? And Zoning Commission has a recommendation. Where are we? I got ahead of myself. Anybody? Nobody? Okay.
No.
Just a reminder, the Planning and Zoning Commission has a recommendation board for council. The commission will vote on each item and forward their recommendation to council. Council makes the final decision on all items. Agenda item number 2 is the Design Guidelines Manual Update. Senior Planner Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez will present. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez, Senior Planner. The city's design guidelines was last updated in June 2014. The Design Guidelines Manual update brought forth tonight is in response to council, resident, and developer feedback, and to conform with the recently ratified General Plan 2035, which calls for Goodyear being a community that distinguishes itself through its high-quality design and character. As you may recall from our presentation last month, the image on the left on the screen shows an existing project in the city that meets the design guidelines of the 2014 manual. But as we have heard from City Council and that community, it does not meet the city's vision for quality design. The photo on the right shows another existing project in the city that also meets the city's 2014 design guidelines. But in this instance, staff and the applicant worked to create supplemental design guidelines to be included with their entitlement application to get a product that meets the city's vision for quality design. The Design Guidelines Manual update that is brought forth builds on the existing design guidelines to provide the clarifications necessary to attract high-quality building and site design, more like the development shown on the right on the screen, but without having to go through an additional step of creating supplemental design guidelines. The update process began in May of 2023 with City Council interviews. It continued with a project kickoff meeting with staff and followed by public outreach. A draft was available to the public for a month on the city's website. A second round of outreach was conducted, and the feedback received by residents and developers was reviewed, and the appropriate edits were made to the draft. The draft was then presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission last month. Today, we are before you presenting the final draft of the Design Guidelines Manual and will be requesting a recommendation of approval to be forwarded to the City Council. The proposed Design Guidelines Manual increases buffers between uses and provides protections for residents and sensitive uses, as well as established neighborhoods and themes. This slide provides an example of buffers and protections for residential uses. On the left is a photo of an industrial use located adjacent to residential without the proper buffers and protections. As a reminder, this photo was not taken in Goodyear. And on the right, we have a photo of an example of an industrial use located in proximity to residential and adjacent to a public street. In this example, the industrial use provides buffers and protections by screening track courts with landscaping walls and with the orientation of buildings that internalize track courts. Staff believes that the proposed design guidelines strengthen the protections for residents and provide clarity to customers on what is expected. The Design Guidelines Update considers the diversity of present and future conditions while upholding high-quality design. The update groups robust design guidelines for the site planning and building design components of projects. It includes guidelines that respects water and maintenance needs, as well as considerations for franchise architecture and new technology. The new design guidelines strengthens design context by considering established character and themes. This will assist in, for example, ensuring that new big box developments are more harmonious with existing neighborhoods. These new guideline considerations are to be applied in addition to the residential, commercial, business park, or primary development type applicable to the project. The photos on the screen convey the diversity of product and architecture that exists in the city today, from historic Goodyear to newer subdivisions and employment centers. Staff incorporated the feedback received from residents and developers into the Design Guidelines Manual draft. This includes the residents' desire for high-quality design, a variety of product, and use of materials within residential streetscapes and corridors throughout the city. The draft also included developers' feedback and desire for the document to be both specific to be able to apply design guidelines appropriately to their projects, but also flexible enough to preserve the creative process and respond to the unique conditions within each project. To address feedback, the proposed design guidelines are complemented with options to maintain flexibility. So developers have the options on how they may propose alternatives to design guidelines while upholding the intent of the guideline and meeting the design guidelines philosophy and design principles, which are to consider the site, the development center, the neighborhood, and the city as a whole, as well as the design objectives to create a sense of place, bring streets to life, provide appropriate transitions between uses, and provide environmentally focused designs. The language in this update has been clarified to ensure that applicants have a clear understanding on the city's requirements and expectations while respecting the unique conditions of their projects and also the residents' desire for high-quality design in the city. The images on the screen come directly from the updated design guidelines manual and provide examples of what diversity of residential development types can look like. Staff and the consultant addressed the feedback that was received at the City Council work session last month. The final draft has stronger language on water and stewardship, water conservation and stewardship, consistent language regarding water features, public art, and landscape throughout the document, and each development type has an access and circulation and parking sections that, for example, aim to address any concerns in shopping centers, accessing or leaving those shopping centers. And staff has also shared the feedback received with other city departments where these issues shared may continue to be addressed in other plan updates as appropriate. The final draft also includes guidelines for massing in material types, which call out for the material types being of durable materials that relate to a sense of quality and permanence. And as you may recall from the presentation last month, the proposed design guidelines includes an exception process for guidelines that, for products that will increase the supply of affordable housing in the city, as it is the city's intent to make it easier and simpler for developers to build affordable housing in the city. In this process, developers may propose alternative designs to meet the design guidelines, while continuing to uphold the manual's design philosophy and principles. Staff has received a letter of support for the design guidelines and the flexibility allowed within the guidelines to build affordable housing in the city. In addition to this exception process, a separate process has been created for developers who would like to propose innovative product and designs which may not have been considered by this update due to their innovative and creative nature. This process will require that the proposed design alternatives continue to uphold the design guidelines, philosophy, and principles, and would require an administrative review by staff and a Planning and Zoning Commission approval. As expressed by City Council last month, times are changing, and staff believes that this additional process will aid staff in addressing the evolving development types in the city. Staff believes that the proposed design guidelines manual addresses City Council, resident, and the feedback received from the development community as well. The manual provides flexibility and options for developers to build in the city while preserving quality neighborhoods for residents because, as our Mayor Picillo says, the city is in the forever business. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council. This concludes staff's presentation. Clay Secco with Michael Baker International, the consultant for the design guidelines, is also present here tonight. We are available to answer any of your questions.
Okay, are there any questions for staff?
Guadalupe, can you explain in a little more detail the exceptions or exemptions allowed for the low-income housing? Like how much deviation will there be in product for something that's low income versus something that's not?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Vice Chair Zambito, Chairman, Commission members. The exemption process for housing affordability requests that the applicant proposes an alternative design that continues to uphold the design guidelines. So staff is still asking for the same high quality as the rest of the developments in the city. However, the alternatives may be a different material but look the same. But the goal of the city is that all of the developments are of high quality.
So a consistent final product, but we'll consider alternative materials potentially.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Okay, anyone from the audience like to speak on this item? Okay, will the secretary please read the recommendation?
Recommend approval of the city's design guidelines manual to city council. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation or a motion, voice motion to recommend denial or otherwise? I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus, a second from Commissioner Smith. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Anyone? Personally, I think this is great, and it's going to make Goodyear, I think, pop a little more, and we're going to be continuing to build out to the south, and these are going to fit into the new concepts that the builders are going to have, and I think it'll be great.
And I'm also open to us having the opportunity to provide feedback as well.
Is there a separate landscaping guideline associated with this?
Thank you, Commissioner Nepomuceno, Chairman Commission. There is not a separate design guideline document as part of the manual, but the zoning ordinance does have an article specific to landscape. The landscape design guidelines here in the manual are not as prescriptive as they are in the zoning ordinance, but they do guide, for instance, the buffers that were mentioned in the presentation.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay.
Please enter, just one moment, sorry. Please enter your vote. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the November 18th meeting.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is the sign package for GSQ. Assistant Planner Jimmy Carrion will present. Any question? Oh, yeah, we'll present. There you go. Good evening, Jimmy.
Good evening, Chairman Clymer and Planning and Zoning Commission. Thanks for having me this evening. As Chairman Clymer stated, my name is Jimmy Carrion, Assistant Planner here with the City of Goodyear. And I'm here before you this evening with the request from Shirley Lamb from Boots and Duke Signs to amend the GSQ Comprehensive Sign Plan, which I'll be referencing CSP for short, Comprehensive Sign Plan. This amendment includes provisions for adjustments to sign types, also height allowances, area allowances for various uses within the area encompassed by the CSP. All right, so the subject property is part of the Goodyear Civic Square planned area development. From this aerial photo, the 48-acre area shown here in red is within Goodyear Civic Square and follows the terms of the GSQ CSP. The original CSP for GSQ was approved back in July 2021 by City Council. And there are two types of amendments to an already approved CSP that exist, so both having varying approval bodies. The first type is called a minor amendment. the minor amendment follows the requirements provided in Article 7 sign regulations of the Goodyear zoning ordinance, it can ultimately be approved by the zoning administrator after review from the Development Review Committee. The second type of amendment, minor, is the major amendment. And so with to be categorized as a major amendment, the request proposes an increase in either the number of signs, an increase to the size or height of any sign beyond what was originally approved under the original CSP, or any modifications to the requirements of Article 7. In the case of a major amendment, the request shall be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and approved by City Council. Okay. So this request would be considered a major amendment and therefore requires Commission and Council review and approval, which is why we're here today. So there's a total of 5 proposed sign amendments that I'll discuss this evening. The first of which is revising which types of multi-tenant monument signs may be placed at main drive entryways, which are located directly off perimeter roads. And I'll be highlighting those locations in the next couple slides. Right now, there are 2 types of multi-tenant monument signs. There's a primary monument sign, you'll see there on the left. There's a secondary monument sign, you'll see here on the right. The design for each is the same. The only difference is the height and scale of each of the signs. Okay. The primary monument sign is 18 feet high, whereas the secondary monument sign is 12 feet high, so 6 feet shorter than the primary. So here you'll see a site map of the area encompassing the CSP. So if you turn your attention to the red X in the center, that's City Hall, that's where we're at now. The shaded green area is Bullard Wash. Monte Vista Road is going to be on the right in this graphic, which is truly north of us, with McDowell Road on the left, south of us, and then you have 150th Drive directly east. Okay. So if you turn your attention to the blue shaded areas, these areas are considered the main drive entries adjacent to those perimeter roads. Again, McDowell Road, 150th Drive, and Monte Vista Road. Okay. The original CSP, it allowed for only the 18-foot high primary monument signs to be in these areas. And so the updated CSP, or the request, this first request would allow either the 18-foot high or the 12-foot high multi-tenant monument signs to be in these areas. And I've highlighted them in yellow here, so this map would call out either the 18-foot or the 12-foot sign. Okay. Moving on to the second request, it's regarding canopy signage allowance. The request asks that canopy signs have a maximum area of 50% of the wall signage allowance versus the 25% maximum allowance that was initially approved. Okay. It also asks that canopy sign letters be restricted to 2 feet in height, except for logos and the first letter of each word, which can be up to 4 feet. So overall, the goal of this amendment request is to allow for greater exposure for tenants who decide to place their signs on a canopy. Okay. Moving on to the third request, it's regarding commercial office building signage. It allows office building signage to occupy 80% of the sign band height and width on both first and upper level signage. The original allowance allowed a 12-inch maximum height for upper level signage and a 10-inch maximum height for the first level signage. So you can see the difference in visibility the proposed amendment would have from these graphic representations taken both from the original CSP highlighted in red here at the top, and then the amended request highlighted in green here at the bottom. And so the rationale behind this request is to provide greater visibility for our office tenants while still maintaining the overall design integrity. Okay. The fourth request is to amend the wall signage requirement for the commercial, retail, and mixed uses within GSQ. The currently approved allowance provides 1.5 square feet of signed copy area per linear foot of building frontage that faces either a public or a private street, and 1/2 square feet of signed copy area per linear foot of building frontage that face internal circulation drives, predominantly internal parking lots in this case. So the proposed amendment, it would allow for 1.5 square feet of signed copy area on all elevations. So regardless of whether it was facing a public or a private street or facing an internal circulation lot. So here on this slide is an example showing you the comparison of the two standards. So the red area, as an example, this is a future tenant whose building is 40 feet wide. The gray shaded area, that represents either a public or a private street. The left side of the building is the main entrance, which faces an internal parking lot. And you can kind of see some of the internal parking lot there, spaces there. And then the right side of the building, that's going to be the rear of the building, which faces that public street. So currently, the current standard would allow 60 square feet of signed copy area for the rear of that building, whereas it would allow only 20 square feet of area in that main entry where customers, generally enter. With the proposed standard, that would be the same throughout. So each elevation would be allowed the 1.5 square foot of signed copy area, regardless of whether it was facing a public, private street, or an internal lot. And again, the rationale behind this request here is to provide greater visibility and exposure for our tenants, or for tenants, especially at those customer entry points. And the final request is addressing drive-through directional signage. So this regulation would mainly pertain to businesses that have a drive-through component, like a restaurant, for example. The original CSP doesn't provide standards for this type of signage. So the applicant is wanting to add a comment stating that drive-through directional signage shall adhere to Article 7 of the Goodyear sign regulations. So they just wanted to adhere to the standards that are already in place in our sign regulations for drive-through signage. All right. Finally, staff has evaluated the impact of this proposed CSP amendment with no major concerns being found. With the stipulations presented, staff recommends approval of the amendment to the comprehensive sign plan for GSQ. That concludes my presentation. I'm of course happy to answer any questions, and an applicant representative is here as well.
Okay, any questions for staff?
Yeah, I'm sorry. go ahead.
Ernie, you go first.
So this only applies to this area, the GSQ, right?
That's correct.
So what happens if some other areas, commercial areas like this, would you allow them to have the same
So they would,
standard?
Sure. So comprehensive sign plan is, in our zoning ordinance, it states that for 3 or more buildings or businesses, a comprehensive sign plan shall be created. And so they would have to, depending on the location, right, and how the orientation of the site or sites, a comprehensive sign plan may be required. And then, so the applicant would then create that comprehensive sign plan. It would then come to planning and zoning for review.
Wouldn't this set a precedent for future projects,
Yeah.
though? If we approve, it would set a precedent for any other developer to come in and say, hey, you got it over there, I want the same.
Exactly.
It's a groundwork, so it's something everybody needs to be aware of, I think. Am I mistaken by saying that?
I wouldn't say you're mistaken. Again, we already have sign regulations, so what we do, our initial step is to compare any sign permits or comprehensive sign plans with our with our zoning ordinance. And if it falls outside of the zoning ordinance, we then will proceed to planning and zoning and city council approval.
Right.
Yes.
But once we approve this, it sets a precedent that anybody else who comes to us and asks for the same thing, we would be hard pressed to say, unless they're asking for something extremely beyond this, we'd be hard pressed to say no.
Yes,
I'll,
Christian?
I'll add a little bit of context that we look at the site, the zoning constraints of that area. One factor that was evaluated in this particular area is the density of buildings and the height allowances of buildings here and the pedestrian nature of this center. So if we were going to compare two different centers, we'd also look at them for, is this a very pedestrian center? Is your zoning allowing you to build buildings up to 150 feet in height? Those types of factors. So I would say that we would evaluate that based on zoning and their zoning requirements as well.
And if the developer, a different developer with not as much pedestrian focus as we have here in the GSQ, if they came in, would staff make that perfectly clear to us that this is how it differentiates?
Yes.
I'd like to see that be very clear. This is what we normally get. This is something that's pedestrian friendly. I'd also like staff to say whether they encourage or discourage or support or doesn't feel it aligns with what we're looking for so that we understand there's a difference.
Absolutely.
Because a couple of the comments I have and questions I have will help us if that's included in there.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Christian.
Well, I guess we just want to make sure that because this is GSQ, that we're making this as an exception. So, in other words, compared to other developments, so.
That's a very good point. And one other note I'll make is that in the entitlement process for GSQ, while they did not create their sign package at that time, they made an acknowledgement that signage would be a major component that was forthcoming. So during that entitlement process, we were also clear, like, you might even see a comprehensive sign package come in across the street, but that acknowledgement was in the actual entitlement case that said there will be a higher level of signage due to the nature of this project.
Okay. No,
Okay, nothing else for staff?
I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
The examples that you used, the Stillery and
Oh,
the
yes.
Copper State,
Go back to that.
Copper and Sage, thank you. Does that express, is that currently what's going to happen when you increase, this is the canopy example, correct? Is this what we will be looking at as far as scale? Because I was driving around trying to understand, well, how is it changing? It's one thing to say it's 100 square feet. It's another thing for the average person to walk by and go, oh, that looks great. Or I like the scale on these, but I want to understand what I'm acknowledging when I vote.
Sure, sure. I can give you an example specifically with the Stillery. So they're on, if you recall, they're on a corner, so they have three sides, and they have canopies along each of the three sides. They were initially proposing 3 canopy signs. With the current allowance, with the current CSP, they weren't allowed to do that based on the size standards. So they had to do one on their main entry, and then one in the rear entry, the patio, which faces Goodyear Way. But they wanted one in the front entry, right, where they're, or in the internal circulation lot where folks park. So they were quite restricted in that sense with the original CSP. And so we want to take advantage of the architecture as well and the canopies and, have that downtown feel. So I think that's the intent of this request.
So what we see here is there'll be more of that.
Correct, yeah. And
Okay.
these adhere to the standards, both.
So I drove around and they did not feel out of scale to me. They're very welcoming. I really appreciate the way they look. So that was I just wanted to understand that and have that conversation.
Certainly.
My other question was the entry, the 20 versus the 60.
Yes, I get that.
Again, scale on that is very challenging. 20, when you get an understanding of what the 60 is, 20 doesn't seem very big. Is that something that they would just print on the door as opposed to having it the same on either side? I mean, 20 feet seems quite a bit smaller than the 60.
It does, and that I think that's what spawned the request for amendment. So just to give you, so with this building, particularly in this example, it's 40 feet wide. So 20 feet, you could have roughly maybe a 5 foot wide by 4 foot high sign. That's 1/8 of that 40 foot, right? So it's very tiny in consideration to the rear sign where it's a back exit. And so I think we're trying to align, more align with the actual scale of the building and building widths. And we found that after review that it's not in excess, it will fit, so.
I think it would have been helpful to have the face of the building with an example of what the sign could have been like.
Sure.
20 versus 60, to give us some feeling for scale. This doesn't give a good feeling, but,
Sure. Thanks for the feedback.
but I'm just, we're not necessarily, all of us are not the techies. So this is your specialty. To you, it makes perfect sense. But getting the scale on that, that's a challenge.
Sure, sure. I'm sure I'll be here again, so I'll keep that.
Just the thought. I mean, I've driven around and looked at a couple things, and I think I'm completely good with this. It just would have been helpful for us and the public watching this to understand the difference between the 20 and the 60, so we could all say, yeah, I'm all for it. As opposed to, gee, if this is how we've been doing it all along, why do we need it bigger? So, thank you, though.
Good questions. Okay,
Just one more, just for clarification, this does not apply only to the existing building that's in this area already. This applies to any future building that will be built in this area, right?
That's correct, Commissioner. So
Okay.
this is the actual, this is the area encompassed by the CSP.
Okay,
So
thank you.
So say the distillery wanted that additional one, would they be coming now when we approve this and putting it up?
they certainly would have the option to do so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
would the applicant like to make a presentation?
I'd definitely like to say a few things.
Okay, sure. Come on up.
Commission Chairman, my name is Andy Gibson. I'm the president of Boots and Duke Sign Company. I represent multiple developers in every city, municipality in the state. First of all, I want to say working with Jimmy was a pleasure. He was always super responsive and worked with us through this process to kind of hopefully get to the goal that everybody's looking for here. This is a unique property. This isn't just your regular shopping center. This is your city. This is your cityscape that surrounds, your city hall. You have tenants that want to move in these spaces that want big signs. They want big letters on that canopy so people come in and go, man, I can't wait to eat at this restaurant when they walk in. When this CSP was originally written, and I did not write it, it was not written by a sign company. It was written by more of an architect that didn't really understand the needs of this center. And I don't think the property owner at the time understood how small the signs were going to be when they went up. Because you can see on the office signs, they look like postage stamps. You can't even read the letters on the wall. The 10 inches tall letter up on a building, nobody can see that. That is code allows for 1.5 square feet, and they went with 10-inch letters, so they went way under what code would even allow. So I'm not sure where that came along, but the Global came to me and said, we want to completely change this. We have tenants that we want to move in here that are looking at these side guidelines and saying this is really restrictive for what we're looking for. To give you an idea, across the street, the Estrella Falls, I'm redoing that CSP right now for the same customer, and they're allowed 1.5 square feet to 1 on all their elevations in that CSP right across the street. So what we're asking for now is equivalent to that. It's the same. So it's not like we're setting a huge precedence. This is the same as what's across the street. So looking at the signs on the canopy, that would be the biggest thing that I would think that some of you would have an issue with. That's the main entrance into the center. They're having way larger signs on the outside of their building or facing streets that don't have a whole lot of traffic than when people pull in the parking lot and see these huge signs on the canopy. For a center like this, it's extremely important to have a larger sign on the canopy. And these are actually kind of toned down, being at 2 feet. So the signs can't be over 2 feet except their logo. So it's going to limit the size of their sign. They just can't have some giant sign up there. They maybe can have a logo that's 3 feet or so, and then 2-foot letters, which to me is ample for everybody to see, but also the customer will be happy with the size of their sign, And then the ground sign switching from 12 to 18 foot, the customer just wanted to decide once those areas were developed, what size sign made more sense, an 18-footer or a 12-footer. to go in those areas, you know, but they're the same designs. So, I'd be happy to answer any other questions that anybody would have, any commissioner would have.
Questions?
How many of those 12 or 18-foot signs do you think will eventually be up in this?
It was originally approved in the CSP. I would have to look at the map, but there's quite a few.
Looks like there's 18,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
an option for 18.
Yeah, 18 of them, which was approved through the original CSP. We're not changing that number. We're just saying they can either be a 12-footer or an 18-footer, a secondary or primary, you know.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you very much.
I appreciate y'all. Thank
Sure
you.
thing. Are there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone in the audience like to speak on this item? Okay, will the secretary please read the recommendation?
Approve the First Amendment to the GSQ Comprehensive Sign Plan, subject to stipulations. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation or an alternative motion through voice vote? I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus, a second from Commissioner Booth. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Anyone?
I do like the additional pedestrian scale. And they're not asking, like he said, they're not asking for more
No,
of
it's just
the
like, yeah.
entry signs. They're just asking for the ability to alter the size of them. No problem with that either.
Sure thing. Okay,
Please enter your vote. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the November 18th meeting.
okay, thank you. Agenda item number 4 is the 2025 Planning and Zoning Calendar. Commission Secretary Alicia Magley will now review the calendar.
Yes. So, and the calendar is available online, attached to the agenda. I have printed out a copy for each of you. Just as a reminder, and as in our bylaws, typically Planning and Zoning Commission meets the second Wednesday of the month. However, that is very dependent on the following council meeting. So essentially, we try to have about a week and a half time between Planning and Zoning Commission to then go to council. Other than that, there is council break, and so that pushes up things, and so there is no July meeting, but there will be 2 in June, and holidays also kind of move it around.
Did you say you're going to be gone?
April, the first meeting in June and October.
Okay. I'll be gone in September. So.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Will the secretary please read the recommendation?
Absolutely. Approve the 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission calendar. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation or an alternate voice motion? I have a motion from Commissioner Nepomuceno, a second from Commissioner Wang. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Everybody's good. Everybody's good. Okay,
Okay.
we're set.
Sounds good. Please enter your vote. Motion passes. 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission calendar has been approved.
Are there any staff communications?
Thank you. I do not have any staff communications tonight.
I do.
Thank you, Alyssa. Yes.
I have one. So I have a new employee next to me. Carolyn Ruiz is joining us from the police department, and she will be joining us as a new development services administrator, and will be reporting to me. Yes, so super excited. You'll definitely be seeing her more at commission meetings, and yeah, if you have anything you want to say, everybody?
This time, just happy to be here.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be held on December the 4th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at the Goodyear City Hall chamber. There will be no further business to discuss. This meeting is adjourned.